guys! Today we'll be recapping a manhwa called The Grand Duke's Beloved Granddaughter. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe so we can bring you even more manhwa recap content. Thanks! Our story begins at the estate of Grand Duke Crichton, where a young but capable private mercenary by the name of Mirabelle is introducing herself to the man of the manor. He's already heard about her talents. She has a reputation for refusing to fail. That's why he hired her. Though it's not her usual type of mission, it's very important for the Duke to have the best possible person on the job. He hands her a picture of a young girl, tasking her with tracking down his daughter, Cornelia. Wait, am I seeing things? Is it just me, or does that girl look exactly like Mirabelle? How is he not seeing the resemblance? The mercenary, too, seems suspicious. She hasn't heard the name Cornelia in many, many years, but it's still familiar to her. It would be, since it's her mother's name. Well, that explains the resemblance. You see, Cornelia Crichton ran away from her home, choosing love over her family's honor. Although she wrote many times to beg her father for forgiveness, they never once responded. Not even after she succumbed to an illness that eventually took her life. It seems the Grand Duke is unaware of her passing, or the daughter she left behind. Otherwise, he wouldn't be asking his granddaughter to search for her. Unable to contain her anger, Mirabelle asks the Grand Duke why he didn't look for her earlier, why he ignored every letter she sent. Oop, so much for hiding her identity. The Duke claims he never received a single letter, but Mirabelle finds that hard to believe. She breaks it to him without any softness. Cornelia has been dead for years, and worst of all, she died hating her father who ignored her every request to be forgiven. Yikes, he won't be recovering from that one anytime soon. The old man starts to tremble, but before he can ask who Mirabelle really is, they are interrupted. The Grand Duke's brother, Daniel, suddenly appears and formally introduces the mercenary as his granddaughter. He reveals himself to be her great-uncle, the true villain of this story. It turns out he was the one intercepting Cornelia's letters because he wanted to make sure his brother never took her back in. How cruel is that? He only told them all of this because he's planning to kill them both. Right now. Mirabelle bravely draws her dagger and stands her ground, even when her grandfather begs her to run and save herself. She only asks if he truly loved her mother. Of course, he did, and promises he never held any resentment for Cornelia. That's all she needed to know. Mirabelle shows Daniel's thugs what she's made of, but ultimately, she's unable to save herself. One of them lands a sword in her side, and she drops to the ground, realizing her life is over. But she never got to avenge her mother or make peace with her grandfather. It can't end like this. Just as the light is fading, she hears a familiar voice calling her name, and she opens her eyes to find her mother by her bedside. She's gone back in time to the days of her early childhood, just after her 9th birthday. While her mother watches her closely, Mirabelle tries to piece together what must have happened. She definitely died, so how has she ended up as a 9-year-old again? Someone must have heard her pleas and given her another chance to set things right. If that's the case, then the clock is ticking. Her first task is finding a way to cure her mother. After that comes revenge. Now that she knows the real villain was Daniel all along, she might even be able to patch up the relationship between her mother and grandfather. But to do any of that, she needs to find a way to meet with the Grand Duke Crichton. She starts by asking her mother about him, but Cornelia is convinced the entire family hates her and refuses to return. So that only leaves one option. Mirabelle must go alone. But that's no easy feat, especially for a 9-year-old. She makes her way on board a merchant's carriage and almost gets away unnoticed. That is, until she realizes there's someone in there with her. A boy with silver hair and blue eyes is hiding right beside her. It looks like they're in the same position. The boy stutters that his name is Jeffrey Coleman, a name Mirabelle recognizes from her past life. Jeffrey Coleman will one day become the most famous mercenary on the continent, and even established his own guild, who were powerful enough to rival the Order of Ryan, a band of Imperial Knights. For his power and prowess, Jeffrey was more commonly known as the Mercenary King, and was known for being both trustworthy and merciful. He tried to recruit Mirabelle several times back then, so she can't help but laugh when she looks at the nervous little boy he is now. She introduces herself as Mirabelle Hale, a name her mother and father gave her. Jeffrey compliments her on it and asks how she ended up on this carriage. She tells him, and in turn he admits that he's being chased by the guard. Actually, he's wanted for murder. What? This little boy? No way! How could a sweet thing like him ever kill someone? Jeffrey tells the story of his time at the Sharon estate, where a man named Guyman lent money to his parents. When they failed to pay it back, he beat them to death, so Jeffrey did the only thing a child could do in that situation, and told the guards. But they did nothing. They just blamed his parents for borrowing money in the first place. Guyman soon found out that Jeffrey reported him and decided to send him down the same road as his mother and father. So the poor kid had no choice. Somehow, he managed to overpower a fully grown man and got his revenge. Despite the incredible danger he himself is in, Jeffrey seems far more concerned with Mirabelle and how worried her mother will be when she wakes up tomorrow to find her daughter missing. Aw, what a thoughtful young murderer! Of course, Mirabelle has no intention of turning around, and she thinks it's cute that he was worried. She gives him a little pat on the head, and Jeffrey turns bright red, demanding she stops at once. His face only gets redder when his stomach growls, and he turns away in embarrassment. Mirabelle brought a few bits and pieces for the journey, so she hands him a potato and tells him to eat up. It's a long way to the capital, after all. To her surprise, Jeffrey is so grateful that he starts to cry. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I'm already obsessed with this kid. He even promises to pay her back, even though it's just a potato. It turns out there's a reason borrowing and being given food makes him so emotional. The reason his parents had to borrow money in the first place was because he was hungry. He never wants to be in debt for food again, so he offers her his hand and doubles down on his promise to return the favor. Well, there are worse people to have in your debt than the future mercenary king. 3 days later, the kids arrive in the capital and immediately break away from the caravan. They part ways, wishing the best for each other and hoping to meet again someday. As he's leaving, Jeffrey once again promises to pay her back for that potato. Okay, buddy, we get it. Now Mirabelle is back on her own and more determined than ever to finish her mission. She arrives at the gates of the Crichton family estate and requests an audience with the Grand Duke. You probably won't be surprised to hear that the guard refuses to let her in. I mean, for all he knows, she's just some kid off the street. Why would he accept her? Fortunately, the Grand Duke himself appears at that very moment, having just returned from an outing. He doesn't even look at Mirabelle and starts heading inside without another word. But she stops him in his tracks by screaming out her mother's name. The Grand Duke is furious at first, thinking she's trying to mess him around. Mirabelle explains that she's Cornelia Crichton's missing daughter and tells him to come and meet her himself if he doesn't believe it. She also admits that her mother is very sick and begins to cry, begging him to help. To her surprise, the Grand Duke changes his tune at once and agrees to come and visit right away. In just a few moments, his schedule is cleared and he orders a carriage to be prepared. They head inside for some food while they wait, but Mirabelle seems hesitant to eat. The Grand Duke kindly tells her that her mother would want her to stay healthy and eat up. Clearly, he can tell she's feeling guilty about indulging in a fancy meal without her. Although he's being gentle, Mirabelle knows he's still suspicious. In the last 10 years, he must have been visited by countless people claiming to have information about his daughter. After all, it's a surprise he even said yes to make the journey. After eating together, Mirabelle and the Grand Duke hop in a carriage and make their way to the village at once. Maybe it's because of her past life, but Mirabelle is already starting to like her grandfather. He's a much kinder person than she realized, and has clearly been through a lot of pain for his daughter's sake. Even though he doesn't believe Cornelia is really her mother, he's still treating her like any grandfather would. That night, when they stop to rest, the Grand Duke pretty much says it himself. He believes she heard the name Cornelia somewhere and suspects she's using it to get his help. I'm sorry, does he not see those bright green eyes? She's a carbon copy of her mother. But he doesn't blame her. Regardless of the truth, he can tell she's desperate and that her mother truly is sick. So whoever she is, he wants to help. Seriously, is this man a saint or something? Now I feel even worse about how he died in her past life. As the fire crackles, he admits that he has many regrets about how she left the Crichton family. He knows now that he made a lot of mistakes and wishes he had never let her go in the first place. You see, originally Cornelia was engaged to the current emperor, James Bazat Castro. But somewhere along the way, she fell in love with her bodyguard, Guile Houston. She wanted to marry him instead, but when her father refused to accept an ordinary man as her husband, they eloped. Guile passed away in a battle against demons, and in the end, Cornelia was left to raise Mirabelle by herself. When they finally arrive at the house, Mirabelle finds her mother's condition has worsened. She's so relieved to see her daughter once again that she collapses, trembling as she holds her child. Across the room, her father is also starting to shake. There's no doubt about it. This woman truly is his long-lost daughter. He also gets on his knees and pulls her into a tight hug while the two of them start to cry. After the emotional reunion has ended, The Grand Duke asks about Guile. He's devastated to think of her struggling to raise Mirabelle alone for the past 4 years, not to mention with her terrible disease. He can't understand why she didn't come back to the mansion as soon as she found out, so Mirabelle explains the misunderstanding with the letters. Obviously, she doesn't mention that his evil brother Daniel has been hiding all of them because, well, that would make her sound crazy. There's a lot to discuss, so the Grand Duke asks her to come back to the mansion where they can catch up and summon a doctor to look at her. While the Grand Duke is sorting things out with his servants, mother and daughter have a quiet moment alone. Cornelia thanks her daughter for being so brave and going to find her grandfather, but she also asks her never again to do something so dangerous. Which seems kind of fair. How panicked would you be if your kid just suddenly disappeared for 3 days? Once they have everything packed, they head toward the carriage, where Cornelia finds a sneaky excuse to get her father and daughter holding hands. They finally get rolling, and the Grand Duke thanks Mirabelle for reuniting their family. She thanks him also for being so trusting. Not many people would undertake a 3-day journey on the slim chance that their daughter might be at the end of it. On the road back to the capital, the Grand Duke and Cornelia share stories and fill each other in on all that's happened in the last few years. When they arrive at the estate, the first person to greet them is Cornelia's brother, Brian, the current Duke of House Crichton. He treats Mirabelle like any other niece and tells her to call him uncle from now on. Isn't that sweet? I'm just waiting for the moment that horrible Daniel guy shows his face. Next up is Brian's son, Elliot Crichton. He's just as friendly as the rest of them and shakes her hand like a proper little gentleman. Once introductions are done, they head inside to rest up. For the time being, Mirabelle will share a room with her mother while the staff prepare a separate one for her. So far, everything seems to be sunshine and daisies, which is how you know bad news is just around the corner. After being examined by a high priest, Cornelia is prescribed repeat treatment once a week for the next 3 months. The priest serves the goddess Duana, the mother of all gods. Those who serve her are blessed with healing abilities, which means they basically serve as doctors for those who can afford them. The high priest is confident that Cornelia can make a full recovery in that time, but he also wants to examine Mirabelle. Apparently, the disease is genetic, so there's a chance it could be passed on. A little nervous, Mirabelle offers him her hand. She ends up being all clear for the disease, but the high priest discovers something entirely different. Mirabelle seems to have a talent for harnessing divine power, something she never discovered in her previous life. Could this be something she acquired when she was reborn? I don't think divine power and mercenary skills would have made a very good match in her past. The high priest invites her to visit the temple sometime, offering to teach her how to use her abilities. The idea is bittersweet for Mirabelle, who loves the idea of being able to heal people like her mother. If only she had this power last time. She agrees to make a visit, and the next morning, the family sit down to have breakfast together. Everything is going well, except for the fact that Mirabelle is struggling to concentrate. I mean, can you blame her? Why is everyone in her family so damn handsome? Uncle Brian is being especially attentive, which comes as quite the contrast to his reputation in her past life. He was known for being cold and cruel, something that Mirabelle saw for herself one time on a demon expedition. Back then, he was the Iron Duke, who moved from one slaughter to another without batting an eye. Now he's like a chatty grandma who won't shut up about how proud he is of her. He then starts babbling about how he wishes they could grow closer so that she won't be so uncomfortable around him. Are we sure this is the same Uncle Brian? The Grand Duke then asks if there's anything she wants. He's never had the chance to spoil his granddaughter before, so now he's keen to make up for it. Suddenly, Jeffrey comes to mind. Although he's on the right track to success as a mercenary, it would be nice if she could make things a little easier for him until then. So she asks her grandfather to lift the bounty on Jeffrey, and he promises to do his best. In other news, the Emperor has somehow already heard about Cornelia's return and asked her to pay him a visit. Uh-oh, that could be awkward. But Cornelia is surprisingly brave and decides to visit him that same day. Since she caused him a lot of trouble for abandoning their marriage, she wants to make things right as soon as possible. That could never be me. I would have just played up the disease if I was her. After Mirabelle has eaten her fill on egg tarts, the mansion maids get to work on fixing her a whole new wardrobe. Cornelia then asks her daughter to accompany her to the palace, since she's a little scared to face the Emperor alone. I'm not surprised. They show up looking like a perfect pair of dolls and are greeted first by Tennervin, the Grand Master of the Royal Guards. He escorts them inside where the Emperor is waiting, rather impatiently. The first thing he says is that they're late. No, "Oh, I'm glad you're alive," or "I'm sorry to hear about that whole terminal illness thing." Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna like this guy. He doesn't seem to have recovered from the day she ran away. Even now, it's obvious that he loved her deeply. Cornelia manages to stand her ground, apologizing for the hurt she caused, but not for her decision. He notices Mirabelle and asks her to leave them alone for a while. You know, so they can get into the nitty-gritty stuff that only exes can talk about. On her way out, Mirabelle bumps into Prince Adrian Castro, the spitting image of his father. Although he's cute, he is pretty stuck up, even for a prince. He's surprised to find out that House Crichton has another child and becomes immediately curious about who is currently talking to his father. Mirabelle realizes he knows more than he's letting on. He ran all the way here as soon as he saw his mother, the Empress, crying about this blast from the past. He wants to teach whoever they are a lesson, but seems very surprised when Mirabelle announces that her mother meant no harm. The next moment, the Empress herself shows up. When she notices Mirabelle, she invites her to have snacks and tea while the grown-ups finish their conversation, which is remarkably kind of her. If I was her, I wouldn't be able to stand the sight of someone who looks so much like my husband's ex-fiancé. Why is everyone in this empire so damned nice? While having tea out in the gardens, Cornelia appears, and things get real awkward real quick. The Empress blames her for causing 8 years of struggle in her marriage, while the Emperor waited for his true love to return. Oof, is she really going to admit all of that in front of her son? More than anything, the Empress is upset that Cornelia disappeared without a word. They used to be friends, and for a long time she didn't know if she was alive or dead. Despite that anger and pain, the ladies are soon hugging it out. They must have been really, really good friends if they can get past all of that. Soon after, the mothers and their kids are sitting down for tea and cake like nothing ever happened. The older ladies are happy for the chance to catch up, though the Empress still has a lot of questions, mainly about why she never reached out. But I mean, you can understand her position. How do you write to a best friend who's now married to your ex-fiancé? Where would you even start? Mirabelle listens closely to her mother and Empress Marianne's conversation. The truth is, Marianne had loved the Emperor for many years. She had only just decided to give up on him when Cornelia ran away with her bodyguard. After that, it seemed like all her dreams had come true. Marianne got to fill the empty spot and marry the man she loved. Only, it wasn't quite that simple. Emperor Castro continued to wait for Cornelia's return. It took 2 whole years of being engaged for him to finally give in and marry the Empress, so you can imagine how difficult that time was for her. Fortunately, when Prince Adrian was born, Marianne found something new to live for, and her life changed for the better. Speaking of the prince, Adrian is making an effort to act more like a gentleman to Mirabelle, despite their rocky start. After spending a wonderful afternoon together, Mirabelle and her mother make their exit, promising to return soon. Prince Adrian awkwardly waves her off as they get into the carriage. Okay, I know he's kind of arrogant, but I think I'm starting to like this kid. On the way home, Mirabelle is plotting the next stage of her rebirth plan, collecting evidence on Daniel. She asks her mother if there's anyone in the Crichton family she hasn't met yet. Cornelia tells her about Daniel, but judging by her expression, it seems she doesn't yet suspect him of anything. Cornelia then asks her a favor. From now on, can she call the Grand Duke Grandpa? Oh, you mean the man she spent all of her past life hating and still finds it awkward to be in the same room with? Sure, no biggie. But he is actually her grandpa, and if it would mean a lot to her mother, then Mirabelle is willing to give it a go. The Grand Duke is there to greet the girls when they return, asking plenty of questions about the Emperor and how it all went down at the palace. Cornelia assures him there's no bad blood, which comes as a relief to her father. As instructed, Mirabelle asks her mother to head upstairs first so that she can talk to her grandpa for a moment. Nice one. Looks like the Grand Duke really appreciates that. After her mother has gone, the two sit down for tea in the very same reception room where she lost her life last time. Despite the eerie setting, Mirabelle is focused on her mission. She can't just outright say she suspects Daniel, a grand uncle that she's never met, of hiding her mother's letters. So instead, she plants the seed of doubt in his mind, asking how it's possible for all those letters to have disappeared. She sent at least 2 a week, some via the Merchants Guild and even through mercenaries. She admits that she's worried. Maybe someone has ill intentions towards Cornelia and her daughter and intercept them on purpose? She's playing the innocent little girl act, but inside, Mirabelle's mind is raging. Daniel is the real reason her mother passed away, the reason she had to bury her with her own 2 hands and fend for herself growing up. The Grand Duke is also suspicious about the disappearing letters, but reassures her that no one in the mansion would do such a thing. Mirabelle doesn't push it, but she does ask him to look into it as a favor. Then she heads back to her bedroom, wondering if there's a chance her Uncle Brian might have been in on Daniel's schemes. But he has nothing to gain from siding with him, so it doesn't seem likely. At the perfect moment, Mirabelle is passing the balcony over the main hall when the very villain she's been expecting finally arrives. Daniel Crichton, looking just as smug as ever, has appeared at last. Daniel spots her at once and asks the butler who she is. Apparently, he didn't know that Cornelia even had a daughter, though that's obviously a lie, considering he intercepted all of her letters. Hesitantly, Mirabelle walks downstairs to greet him. Duke Daniel is all kind smiles and warmth, while Mirabelle just glares at him, not even bothering to hide her disgust. Come on, girl, at this rate she's going to give herself away! She's taken aback by just how well he lies. If she hadn't been literally murdered because of him in her past life, she probably would have fallen for this kind old uncle act. That must be why no one else in their family suspects him either. Well, two can play that game. Acting like a nervous child, Mirabelle introduces herself, but when Daniel reaches for her, she instinctively flinches and takes a step back. So much for playing it cool. Daniel just brushes it off and asks her to guide him to the Grand Duke's current whereabouts. The butler is encouraging her to get to know him, so even though she really doesn't want to, Mirabelle agrees and swiftly leads him up the stairs. While she takes him through the corridors, Daniel remarks on how uncomfortable she seems. He assumes that because she lived her entire life as a peasant, the adjustment to noble life must be hard. He even says she acts like one. The nerve of this guy! He does at least call her pretty, though honestly, it's still a red flag to me. What is she, 9? There's no need to be discussing suitors at this age. Mirabelle has a hard time keeping quiet, but she's determined to enact every step of her revenge carefully. There's plenty of time to take him down. If she has to bear this man a little longer, then she can do exactly that. But he's not exactly making it easy, already giving detailed suggestions as to which noble family she should marry into for the sake of their reputation. Ugh, he really is the worst. Even the butler looks uncomfortable. Fortunately, someone else shuts him up before she has the chance to lose her temper. Elliot doesn't hesitate to stand up to his great uncle, shutting down his latest suggestion that Mirabelle should marry a man 3 times her age. He even goes so far as to say Daniel needs medicine for his memory loss if he can't remember how old Duke George is. Boom! Mic drop moment. He points out that Mirabelle is still new to the manor. If anyone needs a guide, it's her. He then tells his cousin that her room is ready and swiftly separates her from Daniel. Clearly, the Grand Duke's younger brother isn't loved by everyone. Mirabelle's mood picks up immediately upon entering her new bedroom. She's also very grateful that Elliot stood up for her. He warns her to keep her distance from Daniel in the future, especially in situations where they could end up alone together. Well, that's creepy as heck. What happened to make Elliot so wary of him? She decides to ask him straight out, taking advantage of her privileges as a clueless child. Actually, the truth is that Elliot has experienced the same thing she just did. Their great uncle seems to obsess over marriage and what kind of match would most benefit House Crichton. It's like he sees them more as products than relatives. Mirabelle is a little surprised to see how offended Elliot got. Of course, an adult wouldn't stand for that kind of talk, but most kids probably wouldn't understand enough to be upset. Suddenly, she considers an alternate reason for his reaction: puppy love. Elliot suddenly turns bright red, reluctantly admitting that he does indeed have a crush on someone. Isn't he just too cute? Reluctantly, he reveals that her name is Zaniel Suffren. Then he suddenly stands up and says he's leaving. The door slams behind him, but Mirabelle is still smiling long after he's left. In her past life, she once heard a rumor that Lord Crichton and Lady Suffren got married, so it looks like Elliot's first love will come true someday. Now, back to the task at hand. It couldn't have been Daniel himself who intercepted the letters, which means there was someone working for him. Someone with enough power to give orders without the permission of the Grand Duke. Immediately, one person comes to mind: Butler Barden, the man who was waiting so keenly on Daniel this afternoon. Even the way they talked to each other made them seem close. Of course, that's not enough evidence to suspect him. Maybe this is a conspiracy of multiple people? From here, it seems like Mirabelle will have to investigate the house staff more thoroughly if she wants any further information. If she thinks hard about it, she can kind of understand why Daniel did what he did. Cornelia breaking off her engagement with the Emperor caused a huge rift between House Crichton and the Imperial family. But that's still no excuse to cut her off from her grandfather and eventually murder her daughter. Obviously, he never considered the idea that Cornelia's return could fix that rift. From how things went down today, it certainly seems possible. A maid knocks at the door, pulling Mirabel from her thoughts. Her name is Kalina, and by her side is Anita, a young girl who will be her very own personal maid from now on. They help her get changed, and soon all three of them are headed to the dining hall for dinner. On the way, they meet Uncle Brian, who praises her for accompanying her mother to the palace today. I'm pretty sure he's actually just prying her for information, but Mirabel is a loyal daughter. Her lips are sealed. As usual, he seems nervous to ask his niece if he can keep her company, apparently worried about being rejected by a 9-year-old. Honestly, are we sure this is the same guy they called the Iron Duke? This weepy man? He literally just started crying over her cuteness. It's still a little difficult for Mirabel to believe that this is all real. After years of struggling with no one but her mother by her side, having a reliable family who truly care for her is quite a shock to the system. As they walk, she tells her uncle about her meeting with the Empress and Prince Adrian. She asks if he knew about Marianne's relationship with her mother, and he confirms that she was one of the most devastated when Cornelia ran away. Brian has already guessed that Adrian might have been rude to her, but Mirabel keeps her lips sealed about that too. She's a natural at being a noble. He encourages her to speak up if the prince ever gives her trouble in future. Her Uncle Brian is actually his swordsmanship instructor, so it would be only too easy to teach him a lesson. I like the sound of that. On that subject, Mirabel suddenly asks if he could teach her swordplay too. Obviously, she has plenty of experience from her past life, but she never received formal training. And since she died in a sword fight, it's only natural that she wants to protect herself this time around. Brian warns her that he wouldn't take it easy on her just because they're related, but Mirabel is determined to learn, no matter how hard it might be. So Brian accepts her as his pupil. Their first lesson will be tomorrow at sunrise. Oof, he wasn't kidding about not taking it easy. The two of them finally arrive at the dining hall, where Mirabel's doting grandfather insists she sit beside him. Her grand uncle gets to watch firsthand how the whole family revolves around her. The Grand Duke is just as protective as Brian, but everyone is clearly very affectionate towards her. You see that, Daniel? You better watch out. On the contrary, instead he pokes fun at his brother for not getting all teary-eyed because of his granddaughter. The Grand Duke thinks they haven't met, so he tries to introduce them before Daniel interrupts. Elliot steps in to explain, taking the chance to expose Daniel's behavior instead of letting him sugarcoat what really happened. You go, Elliot! The Grand Duke doesn't take it too seriously, but he does give his brother a few words of caution. Maybe that will put him back in his place. Barely half an hour later, the Duke is already telling the story of how Mirabel first arrived at the mansion, bragging about how clever his granddaughter is. She feels a little awkward having the attention of the whole table, but her mother's gentle touch provides some comfort. Daniel is still playing the part of the doting uncle, even suggesting she could fit to lead the dukedom someday. Yeah, right. As if that wasn't enough, he goes one step further and proposes they host a ball to celebrate Cornelia's return. I don't know about you guys, but I smell a scheme. Cornelia seems hesitant to accept, mostly because she's worried about her daughter. It's important to remember that in noble society, a ball is never just a ball. It will be a chance to celebrate and reconnect with old friends, but also a chance for people to gossip behind their backs. That's probably the main reason Daniel suggested it in the first place. For that reason, Mirabel is determined to prove that she can't be so easily frightened. With her daughter on board, Cornelia hesitantly accepts the idea, and so the Grand Duke agrees to begin the preparations right away. The next morning, Mirabel is getting ready for her first ever swordsmanship lesson with Uncle Brian. Her young maid Anita seems upset that she couldn't help her get dressed. She's kind of adorable, seeing how dedicated she is to her new job already. She leads Mirabel to the training hall, where the soldiers are already hard at work doing their exercises for the day. Brian and Elliot are there too. They decide to start with a warm-up demonstration and tell Mirabel to follow each step carefully. After that comes a test of stamina, which is basically just a one-lap race around the training room. Mirabel puts her all into every stage and quickly realizes that she's nowhere near as fit as she was in her mercenary days. Yeah, no duh. She's not a trained fighter anymore. She's a 9-year-old. Despite her exhaustion, Uncle Brian is very proud of her efforts already. But he wasn't kidding about not cutting her any slack. She's barely caught her breath before they were doing sit-ups. If I was her, I would have gone back to bed by now. Anita struggles watching her mistress collapse over and over again from exhaustion. It kind of seems like it's hard on her Uncle Brian too, though he sticks to his promise and sees the session through to the end. Before she's even allowed to touch a sword, he's determined to raise her stamina by doing these exercises every morning. Although it's tiring, Mirabelle is determined to prove herself, so she assures him she's up to the task, and thanks him for taking the time to train her. That day at lunch, the Grand Duke is delighted to hear how hard his granddaughter worked, and looks forward to her future progress. Of course, Daniel can't help but stick his nose where it doesn't belong, asking if there's really any need for a daughter of Crichton to learn how to fight. This time, Mirabelle doesn't wait for anyone to step in and defend her. She answers herself that there are plenty of successful female knights in the Empire. That would probably have done the job, but she can't help herself. Mirabelle then goes on to suggest that he's only belittling her efforts because he's never achieved anything in his own life. Whoa, I'm surprised she got away with that one. In his own subtle way, Daniel strikes back by claiming that Mirabelle is in dire need of some etiquette lessons before she's exposed to wider society. Unfortunately, that is an unavoidable aspect of noble life, so they agree to let Cornelia start looking for suitable tutors. She herself wants to brush up on the basics, so she'll be sitting in on some lessons to refamiliarize herself. After lunch, Mirabelle finally makes the trip to the temple like she promised the high priest. On the way, she thinks over her conversation with her mother, who confessed that she was worried about her daughter learning the same craft as her father. It only makes sense that she'd be concerned, especially since he was killed in battle. Mirabelle assures her nothing like that will happen again. Their fighting days are over. Or so we hope. On the carriage ride, she spots a tuft of silver hair, certain for a moment that it's Jeffrey. The carriage driver slams on the brakes, but he's already gone, so Mirabelle decides to ask someone at the mansion to find out what he's up to these days. Curious, Anita asks about him, wondering if there was something between the two kids. Mirabelle says it's nothing dramatic. Their bond is only worth a few potatoes. Finally, she arrives at the temple, keen to discover the full extent of her divine abilities. The same high priest greets Mirabelle and her little entourage, grateful that she made the effort to visit. He guides them inside the temple to a grand set of doors which only she can enter. He doesn't explain what will happen, only that all the other priests have gone through this experience. It's sort of like a rite of passage. Well, that sounds incredibly suspicious. You can understand why Mirabelle is nervous. But she doesn't question the priest and pushes open the doors to find a long hallway with a large blue gem at the center. Her nerves get the better of her, and Mirabelle starts wondering if this is a trap. She's just turning around when an elderly man calls her back. He introduces himself as Pleon, a name she recognizes as the saint of the Temple of Duana. Unfortunately, by pointing this out, she also exposes herself. Saint Pleon didn't actually appear until she was 20 in her past life. No one in this timeline should know of him yet. But Pleon doesn't seem to be surprised. In fact, he seems to know exactly who she is. Apparently, they've been looking for her for some time. They know that she came from the future, but Mirabelle admits herself that she doesn't have very useful information. She lived a pretty ordinary life last time, so unless he wants tips on how to camp out in the woods or fall into the trap of an evil great-uncle, she doesn't have much to offer. But Pleon says she's more special than that. She was chosen by an entity. That's why she's been sent back here. He pulls out a pendant chain with a tiny little snake, claiming that thing somehow sent her to the past. Ugh, what is it with these priest types? Why can't they just be straightforward? Before she can ask him anything else, Pleon vanishes into a pile of ash. She doesn't see him again, and in the days that follow, there isn't much time to think about their interaction. Her new schedule is full of lessons in stamina training and etiquette. Her tutor, Viscountess Maynard, taught Cornelia too when she was younger. She's pretty intense, but they have to rush things a bit since the ball is now only one day away. When she finally gets a moment to herself, Mirabelle pulls out the snake pendant, surprised to find that its eyes are closed now. Right before her eyes, they open again, suddenly staring right back at her. At first, Mirabelle can hardly believe what she's seeing, but things get even weirder when she suddenly hears a voice in her head. It sounds like a little girl, but there's no doubting it came from the pendant. What the heck is a talking snake doing locked up in a necklace? The snake introduces itself as Goddess Duana's very own guardian dragon, who goes by the name Vivre. She can even come out of the pendant to speak to her. The name rings a bell. Vivre is known to the common people as a serpent servant of the goddess. But that creature was meant to be white, with a long scaly body, translucent wings, and ruby red eyes. This friendly little blob looks nothing like the creature of legend. She's just plain cute. Mirabelle falls for her at once, unable to take the serpent seriously. Vivre assures her there's a very good reason for appearing in this form. It turns out she's been trapped inside this pendant ever since her battle against the infamous Black Dragon. She lost a lot of strength, so now she can only appear in this form. Now it makes sense as to why St. Pleon kept referring to this pendant as a living being. It all sounds a bit crazy if you ask me, but after dying and being reborn as her 9-year-old self, pretty much anything is possible for Mirabel. She assures Vivre that she has no suspicions about her identity, and asks why Pleon entrusted her of all people with such an important creature. Vivre claims she can answer all her most desperate questions, including the most important one of all. Why was she brought back to life? The only reason it was physically possible, Vivre claims, is because she retained a trace of the Black Dragon Calypso. You see, in the future, sometime after Mirabel died, Calypso was revived. But even before his return, he was able to influence humans, including Daniel. However, as Mirabel points out, those two things don't add up. Just because she was killed by someone under the influence of the Black Dragon, that doesn't automatically explain how she went back in time. Wouldn't that mean everyone Daniel killed that day was reborn, including the Grand Duke? Vivre explains that the one who brought her back wasn't Calypso. It was her. With Pleon's help, of course. She chose him to prevent the resurrection of the Black Dragon, giving him some of her powers to root out those under his influence. But the two of them never managed to defeat Daniel, and ultimately they failed to prevent the return of Calypso. It was Pleon who found Mirabel first, so he sailed Vivre into the pendant while she turned back time to search for her. He waited for years and years at the Temple of Duana, and when she finally arrived, his job was complete. That's why he just turned to ash in front of her. He literally died on the spot. At this point, I just want to pause and say if anyone else's head is spinning, don't worry, I'm with you. But what is clear so far is that Mirabel wasn't brought back to life for revenge, but to stop the Black Dragon. Vivre seems to have a lot of faith in her, but our 9-year-old heroine is a little skeptical. After all, even in her past life, she only lived to 26. Couldn't they have picked someone with a little more experience? Fortunately, Vivre doesn't want her to defeat Calypso in battle, just entrap and seal him in an eternal slumber. Sure, no biggie. Sounds like a piece of cake. Currently, the Black Dragon is bound by powerful magical constraints, so she just needs to make sure those restraints never get severed, or in other words, stop the resurrection from happening in the first place. Still, it's hardly a simple task, and if there's one thing Mirabel learned back in her days as a mercenary, it was to never work for free. So in exchange for taking on this insane mission, she wants to be compensated. Vivre assures her that if she is successful, the Temple of Duana will treat her like a saint and give her anything she asks for. But Mirabel isn't interested in a physical reward. Based on what Vivre has said so far, it seems like Daniel is the one trying to free Calypso from its restraints. All she wants is proof, evidence of his wrongdoings, so that she can use them and banish Daniel from her family before he can try to take over. If she can prove his ties to the Black Dragon, then convincing her relatives that he's up to no good will be much easier. Unfortunately, Vivre doesn't have any information. All she knows is that there's a group of villains who support the Black Dragon, and Daniel Crichton is their leader. She also doesn't have any further information on how to stop him either. She's kinda useless for a Divine Guardian, isn't she? What she can do is give Mirabel some divine power, which will help her stand a chance against the Black Dragon's supporters. Divine powers would certainly help in her mission to get revenge. Plus, we can't ignore the fact that Vivre and Pleon literally saved her life. She kind of owes them. Just to make sure she understands, Mirabel asks if they want her to eliminate Daniel before he can resurrect the Black Dragon. In that case, their goals align. It's like hitting two birds with one stone. I mean, one of those birds is really a dragon, but same difference, right? Mirabel accepts, and Vivre is so grateful that she starts to cry. Can serpents even shed tears? I'm getting distracted. Now that the big stuff is out of the way, they can get down to the details. Vivre promises to give her two different kinds of divine power. One, she already knows, the healing power available only to priests blessed by goddess Duana. The other is a little more exciting. Vivre summons a ball of golden light above them. It slowly floats down to Mirabel and morphs into the shape of an elegant sword. And this is no ordinary sword. Crafted from one of Vivre's own bones, this sword is known as Lespid, and has been passed on from generation to generation of those who have joined the battle against Calypso. It's especially powerful against the dark powers that the dragon uses to control his servants, and only appears when she wants it. To test this theory, she squeezes her eyes tight shut and thinks about no longer wanting the sword. Just like that, it vanishes. Which is a good thing too. Anyone under the Black Dragon's influence will recognize it at once, so it's important to keep the sword hidden unless the situation calls for it. Mirabel summons it again, giving the sword a few test swipes to try it out. It's been quite some time since she last held one, but you know our girl still has a knack for it. Hopefully that will give her the motivation she needs to get through Uncle Brian's brutal training. With a new mission to work towards, Mirabel wakes up the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. Which is fortunate, since the ball is right around the corner. Literally. Anita and Kalina do their best to make her glow in a beautiful ball gown, and then Elliot is there to escort her to the main event. This is quite the stage for her debut appearance in society, demonstrating the power and influence of the House of Crichton. It's a pretty big deal, but rather than being intimidated, all Mirabel can think about is Daniel and what his next move is going to be. Meanwhile, Elliot thinks she's distracted because of nerves and assures her that she will do just fine on her debut. Plus, they're a pretty powerful family. Even if she does mess up, no one would dare mention it. Like a proper young gentleman, Elliot takes her hand and they head inside together. They are announced in front of just about every member of noble society, and then the Grand Duke takes her and Cornelia aside for a speech. Everyone knows Cornelia already, so they seem especially interested in the little girl by her side. It's clear to see that the Duke is very fond of her, so the reaction from the crowd is very positive. The Duke gives the guests permission to freely enjoy themselves, allowing Mirabel too to relax. Soon after, she spots the prince and his mother, the Empress, entering from above. She wasn't expecting both of them to show up, but it's certainly a boost for the Crichton family's reputation. Prince Adrian seems to be looking for her and points her out to his mother. They walk over to greet the Crichtons, though the Empress is particularly sweet towards Mirabel. While the ladies chat like old friends, Adrian kind of just stares at her until he builds up the courage to say she looks nice. Clearly, he didn't mean to say it out loud, judging by the way he immediately turns bright red. Aww, he's such a cutie. He apologizes for his behavior when they first met. It's not the most convincing apology in the world, but Mirabel really doesn't mind. The gesture itself is enough for her to forgive him with a kind smile. Now that they've made up, the prince asks her formally to be his friend, in the most adorably awkward way possible. I know he's the prince, but did anyone teach him social skills? He can't seem to stop blushing. Cornelia and Marianne are finding the whole thing very amusing, but Mirabel has taken the request very seriously and is now weighing up whether Prince Adrian is truly the kind of person she wants to be friends with. So far, he's just been acting like a sweet little brother, so she accepts, shaking his hand as Adrian boldly declares that they are now officially friends. What is this, some kind of political agreement? Immediately, Adrian brightens up and asks her for one more favor. Would she like to dance? Mirabel, of course, thinks this is all just fun with friends, but I think all of us can read the expression on Prince Adrian's face. This is young love. No one can convince me otherwise. Mirabel agrees, but asks him to do it the right way and make a formal request, the way gentlemen do at balls like these. Adrian takes it very seriously, getting down on one knee and offering her his hand. Is this the way people ask for dances here? It looks more like he's about to propose. She takes his hand, allowing him to lead her confidently onto the dance floor. Since he's younger, he's still quite a bit shorter than she is, but that doesn't seem to bother Adrian as he spins her around the room. He spends the whole time looking totally terrified, but at least he's not a bad dancer. Or maybe I spoke too soon. The next second, he slipped and is heading for the ground when Mirabel catches him at just the right moment, bridal style. Oh, how the tables have turned. Everyone in the ball is now obsessed with Mirabel, but the poor prince is humiliated. She reassures him that it's really no big deal. They're still just kids. He doesn't have to act like a perfect royal yet. Even so, both of them are acting like perfect little nobles when they part ways. The guests are so impressed with their manners that they actually applaud them for making such a lovely pair. Of course, people are already talking about their future relationship and how a wedding between the two could change the fate of the Crichton and Imperial families for the better. Would people calm down already? They're only children. Adrian doesn't seem bothered one bit by the gossiping, but for Mirabel, who is actually 26, it's obviously pretty uncomfortable. Luckily, Elliot arrives to break up the discomfort, offering a formal greeting to Adrian as well. He compliments their dancing and then introduces the girl beside him, who is none other than Zaniel Suffren, his secret one true love. And boy, is she pretty! Elliot certainly has good taste! She introduces herself to the prince while Mirabel watches her cousin closely. Zaniel is already gushing with how happy she is to meet her, since Elliot has been singing her praises for quite some time. Mirabelle is already delighted since she knows they end up married in the future. But that kind of makes her want to tease them, so she asks if they're going to follow the prince's lead and dance together. Obviously, when she puts it that way, they can't really refuse, but both kids are turning bright red from embarrassment. Mirabelle then suggests that maybe Elliot can't dance, which leaves him no choice. Feeling the need to prove himself, he asks Zaniel to accompany him to the dance floor, with the same awkward fumbling that Adrian had. The couple walk away, leaving the prince another chance to make his move. Since it's her first grand ball, he offers to accompany Mirabelle for the rest of the evening. You know, to show her the ropes. And he does his job very dutifully, teaching her about wine being off limits and how children usually debut in high society. Even though she already knows all of this, Mirabelle listens politely. Eventually, the prince falls asleep and is carried to bed, giving her a chance to quietly step outside. The ball has gone on for much longer than she expected, and frankly, Mirabelle is a little drained. She decides to take a short walk around the perimeter and spots something rustling in the bushes. Any normal girl would run back to safety, but this is Mirabelle. Instead, she grabs a stick and jumps into the wilderness, ready to attack whatever comes out at her. The last thing she's expecting is for Jeffrey to emerge, scrambling through the undergrowth with a tiny bouquet in hand. He gets the fright of his life when he looks up to find Mirabelle looming over him with her giant stick. She helps Jeffrey to his feet, asking how the heck he ended up at the grand ball. Of course, he came to see her, and seems delighted that he stumbled upon her all the way out here. Mirabelle isn't quite so pleased. If he had been found by a guard, he'd be in serious trouble. Jeffrey, as usual, isn't bothered about the risks. He just wanted to see her and hand her this adorable tiny bouquet. It doesn't quite pay off his potato debt, but it's certainly a start. Mirabelle likes it so much that she pins it to her dress for safekeeping. Poor Adrian is probably tucked up in bed right now. He has no idea Mr. Steal Your Girl himself has arrived. Mirabelle gives Jeffrey an affectionate pat and tells him to be more cautious next time, making him blush. When she pulls out the leaf in his hair, the poor boy nearly faints. He has a lot more scars than when they last met, and wants to try healing them with her new divine powers, but initially, Jeffrey is far too embarrassed to let her try. That's what our Mirabelle does. She's an expert at making boys nervous. Then, he summons his courage and grabs her, inviting her to look more closely at the wounds. Now, she's the one who's flustered, mainly because she doesn't want them to get caught, but still, now that she actually has him prepped, Mirabelle realizes she has no idea how to use her divine powers. Fortunately, Vivre is there to teach her, whispering from the locket to focus her energy at the end of her fingertips. Mirabelle is so talented it takes no time at all, and soon Jeffrey's cheek is perfectly healed. He's pretty impressed, but she asks him to keep this a secret for now. Things could get messy if the adults find out about her powers at this stage. Mirabelle wants a chance to properly catch up, so she leads him to an isolated spot near a pond. She wants to know why he took such a big risk to come visit, but Jeffrey just wanted to say thank you. The Grand Duke Crichton lifted his bounty and even paid off his debt to the man who killed his parents. He couldn't understand why, and even visited the house for an explanation. Eventually, he ran into the Grand Duke himself, who explained that he was just doing what his granddaughter wished. Jeffrey was curious, so he tailed the Crichtons and eventually saw Mirabelle in a carriage headed back from the temple. So it was Jeffrey she saw that day. While holding hands like a real couple, Jeffrey thanks her from the bottom of his heart for clearing his name. He's so grateful that he actually starts to cry. Mirabelle encourages him to let it all out. She even hands him a handkerchief, which Jeffrey decides to keep. He catches her staring at him because, well, duh, our girl is smitten, but Mirabelle just says it's because she likes his hair. For a moment, Jeffrey is tongue-tied, but then he turns back and calls her pretty. I'm obsessed with these two. Mirabelle, as always, brushes it off by thinking he's still trying to express his gratitude. If she's this bad at sensing when people have feelings for her, well, this is going to be a hella long series. Out of nowhere, she asks Jeffrey if he wants to stay with her from now on at the Crichton mansion. She knows what lies ahead for Jeffrey if he continues down the path set out for him. The road to becoming the king of mercenaries will no doubt be full of hardship and pain. Jeffrey thanks her for the offer, but politely declines. She's already helped him a lot, so now he's determined to make his own way. But he does ask permission to come and visit from time to time, which Mirabelle obviously grants, on the condition that he stops sneaking in through the bushes. They hear Cornelia calling, so Jeffrey heads out. He pauses, about to say something important, before the courage fails him and he runs away. Oh, these boys, why are they all such babies? I guess some of them are actual babies, but still. After the ball, the Crichton household returned to normal with a few small changes. After After 2 dreary weeks of stamina training, Uncle Brian finally allows her to start training with a wooden sword. Things only got harder from there, but being taught by a real master makes it all worth it. Brian is already singing her praises and tells Cornelia that her daughter has a true gift. Daniel, as always, is there to put down her achievements and make it seem like she might get hurt. Shut up, Daniel! No one asked for your opinion! He also asks Cornelia if she saw any handsome men at the grand ball. He's trying to get her remarried because, apparently, his agenda is just to marry everyone in his family off so that he can take the throne. Ugh, I can't stand this guy! Mirabel won't let him get away with it. She exposes him in front of the whole family for trying to set her up with some older men, and even said it was for the sake of the family's prospects. Daniel tries to play it off and claim it was a misunderstanding, but Elliot backs her up. The Grand Duke heavily cautions him, but he still assumes Daniel has no bad intentions and tells the kids it was probably a misunderstanding. After lunch, Mirabel finds Elliot out in the gardens, hoping to approach her potential ally to team up against their great uncle. Elliot gets surprised when Mirabel runs to question him about Daniel. But as the older cousin, Elliot instantly corrects her, telling her to call Daniel their great uncle or she would get in trouble if somebody else hears her. Child, if you only knew, nothing is great about that psycho! As they stroll, she asks him if he likes their great uncle, and he gives her a firm no, but he can't help but wonder why she brought it up now. This prompts Mirabel to reveal that she and her mother were writing letters to their grandfather, but someone intercepted them, so he was unaware of what had happened to them. Well, because the letters were sent through travelers, it is possible that they were lost in transit. But her mother wrote letters every week for years, and the letters were entrusted to various persons. So it is reasonable to assume that at least one letter made it to the Cretan mansion, right? So something is clearly being done to stop her mom from going home. All of this makes sense to Elliot, but he still doesn't understand why, of all people, she would suspect their great uncle. Even if she were to admit that this isn't merely a suspicion but the truth, she decides to keep it a secret because who would believe that she saw the future and regressed? She also has come to realize that her Uncle Brian, also known as the Iron Duke, is capable of protecting the family from danger. However, he was absent during the incident that led to their deaths, suggesting that Daniel plotted the attack while her uncle was away. In any case, she decides to simply ask Elliot to assist her with the investigation. After all, if they can prove that the letters were stolen, they would be able to track down the criminal. Otherwise, they'll be able to rest easy, so it's a win-win situation. It appears that Big Cousin wants to check it out as well, prompting Mirabel to request that he compile a list of those who may have been involved, because she doesn't know who works in the mansion. Thankfully, Elliot concurs, and she couldn't help but smile with relief at finally having someone on her side. Even though Mirabel is younger than him, I'm glad he treats her seriously. Still lost in her own thoughts about what to do next, she doesn't catch Elliot's endearing smile as he eventually breaks the silence on how horrible the Cretan estate had been before she and her mom had returned. It had been more lively when his mother was present, but once she passed away, living in the mansion suffocated him. He then pats her head, stating that he loves how warm their home is now and is overjoyed that she and Aunt Cornelia have returned. Oh, what a sweet boy! As Mirabel and Anita walk to her class, cute Vivre begins chatting to her mind, stating that he is about to give her an important story, prompting Mirabel to ask Anita to fetch her juice so she may have some alone time with the Guardian. However, it appears that she does not have to worry about speaking out loud to Vivre because she can interact with him in her thoughts, which she finds fascinating. This reminds Vivre of Pleon, who had the same reaction as Mirabel, prompting him to tell her that just as Pleon became a saint after bonding with him, Mirabel has become a priestess as a result of him. This is a little much for our girl to process, but there are more pressing issues to address, including the Black Dragon, which she is really interested in. That being stated, Vivre suggests that they go to the temple today and discuss it with the others. But our girl is a dedicated student and will attend class today, so no, little snake. The following day, Mirabel, Kalina, and Anita are traveling to the temple in a carriage. However, she can't resist the urge to ask Vivre about Saint Pleon, who turns to ashes as soon as he gives her the pendant. Her curiosity regarding Saint Pleon's fate prompts Vivre to advise her not to be concerned, since Pleon has always been a servant of the goddess Duana, and he considers it an honor to be named as her saint, even if it is in a different timeline. Vivre goes on to explain that normally he should forget everything that happens in the future, But thanks to Goddess Duana's grace, the present Pleon remembers everything from that tragic day they failed, as it's essential for taking down Calypso. Soon after, Lionel, a dashing man with blonde hair who works as a priest at the Goddess Duana temple, greets them warmly. She lets him lead the way, and as they walk down the hallway, she witnesses some priests lowering their heads to her, making her wonder whether everyone is aware that she has already accepted Vivre's offer. As she steps into the conference room, she quickly recognizes the Archbishop and smiles at Pleon of the current timeline. After she formally introduces herself, Archbishop Baron extends a warm welcome to her on behalf of everyone present. They all gather around a long table, and before starting, the Archbishop expresses gratitude to her for making such a difficult decision. This is new! The entire temple is aware of the main lead's regression. He then goes on to share that there are individuals trying to undo Calypso's seal, particularly her great-uncle Daniel Cretan. They also believe that Daniel Cretan holds the ward stone that seals in the Black Dragon Calypso. So they really need to either stop Daniel Cretan, get the ward stone from him, or eliminate him. Hooray for a manhwa where the temple isn't wicked! Mirabelle informs them that Calypso's resurrection will occur 14 years after Daniel's revolution, so she suggests that they keep a close check on Daniel and be prepared for anything. She is certain that if she cannot stop Daniel Cretan's plan, she will kill him herself. She then reveals that she has Lesped, but Pleon tells her that while having Lesped will allow her to face Daniel, she must be able to use it successfully, which may mean killing him. She pauses and adds that even though she's just 9 years old, she can enhance her swordsmanship with rigorous training. Then she smiles, considering how it would ease Pleon's fears if she were to grow as strong as the King of Mercenaries, aka Jeffrey Coleman. Following that, they all resolve to gather further information, and before she goes, Lionel, Pleon, and the Archbishop call her attention to remind her that if she needs assistance, she should feel free to visit the temple at any time, as everyone there is willing to assist her. She quickly expresses her gratitude and smiles, admitting that she does need some help. As they walk, Mirabelle apologizes to Father Lionel for her sudden request for him to help her learn how to control her divine powers. Vivre then assures Mirabelle that learning to wield her divine powers will allow her more freedom, which he eagerly awaits. Vivre goes on explaining that Mirabelle will eventually be able to draw him out of the pendant and materialize his soul, eliminating the need for them to communicate through the artifact. I hope Vivre maintains his cuteness level when it happens. Lionel then shows her the area where she'll be training from now on. As they begin, he demonstrates how heavenly powers feel, urges her to remember the sensation, and instructs her to attempt to locate the same energy in her body. She begins to concentrate, but finding the divine power within her is more difficult than it appears, prompting Vivre to inform her that her powers are not something she can find. This confuses her, so she decides to focus her thoughts on how her energy feels, and a gentle warmth energy envelops her, and then, voila! Her energy itself is her divine powers! After Father Lionel is overjoyed that Mirabelle can now control her abilities, she gets a little carried away trying to expand the radiant light on her hand, which causes it to burst, making everyone in the room worry for her safety. Lionel concludes that Mirabelle has successfully learned to feel and produce her divine powers, and suggests that they will practice controlling them carefully. He then gives her a crystal ball to assist her to control her immense powers, which she joyfully accepts. After 3 long hours at the temple, Mirabelle finally makes it home and feels a wave of relief wash over her. She then plans to shower and rest, but to her surprise, she notices a boy squatting on the ground. As she approaches him, she realizes he's the crowned prince who radiantly smiles at her. It appears that the Empress came to see Mirabelle's mom, and this little cutie patootie decided to tag along to see her. When Prince Adrian starts pressing her with questions about her temple visit, she swiftly diverts his attention by revealing that her uncle, who teaches him swordsmanship, has also been teaching her. This amazes him that he immediately asks if they may spar together, because Elliot is the only person his age who can spar with him. But Elliot is too strong for him, which makes sense given that her cousin has spent his life training, plus Elliot is older than the prince. Mirabelle teases the prince that they can spar together, but he may regret it because she would undoubtedly win. The sight of the prince and Mirabelle at the training ground shocks Uncle Brian, who promptly rejects their request to spar, reasoning that Mirabelle has only had a 3-day training session with a wooden sword. However, when Mirabelle explains that actual swordplay can benefit her and that she trusts him to look after them, Uncle Brian gives in and agrees to be their judge. Knights begin to gather to witness their fight, and as soon as Brian gives the signal to start fighting, Mirabel notices that the prince is already studying her every move. Still, she decides to make the first move and sprints towards him, but she trips, allowing the prince to swing his sword at her. So, being a skilled mercenary, she anticipates his move and ducks down, hitting his sword, causing Adrian to lose his balance and fall to the ground. Brian declares Mirabel as the winner while the prince calls her name. And you may expect him to be grumpy and arrogant, but Adrian smiles brightly and is astounded at how amazing our girl really is. I adore how humble the prince is. However, it comes as a surprise to Mirabel that her uncle isn't reacting with joy as she expects. Instead, he just looks at her. Suddenly, he asks whether she can spar one more time, and as soon as she accepts, he summons Elliot to the center with his wooden sword. Oh, it seems Uncle finally figured out that Mirabel has some serious talent up her sleeve. Elliot obeys his father's orders, but is baffled as to why he must fight with his 9-year-old cousin, while Mirabel suspects that her uncle has spotted that she pretended to trip earlier to defeat Adrian. Brian doesn't respond to Elliot and simply asks Mirabel if she wants to continue. Well, Elliot is the strongest kid here, so now is her chance to put her skills to the test. When the sparring begins, unlike the prince, she notices that Elliot dislikes the duel, which she understands, but she still intends to give it her all. Elliot then commands Mirabel to attack him, something she eagerly does. But as soon as their swords clash, she begins to tremble because her power is clearly weak to match his. She chooses to shove him and hops away, urging him to get serious already. And Elliot appears to be quite obedient because he now holds his sword properly and has a serious expression. This time, he attacks her first, and as feared, their physical power is not comparable. So she quickly evades, grabs his sword, and throws it away, catching Elliot by surprise. If Uncle had not taken action to stop Mirabel, her wooden sword would have undoubtedly damaged Elliot's neck. And just like that, our girl won another sparring match. Elliot never imagined Mirabel throwing away his sword in that manner, but it teaches him that anything can happen on the battlefield, which Brian approves of and encourages his 12-year-old son to train harder now that he is lost to his cousin. The sun has already fallen when the sword battle concludes, leading the Empress and Prince Adrian to go home. Mirabel then takes a shower and goes to the dining hall for a family dinner when she finds Daniel has not yet arrived. She learns from her grandfather that Daniel is at a gathering that he has been attending on the 15th of every month for the past 30 years, but Grandpa appears to be clueless of any further details. What? He has been attending this event for 30 years and no one has ever asked what it is? Anyway, Mirabel and Vivre are skeptical of this meeting and suspect it's tied to Calypso, so they intend to look into whatever it is. Uncle Brian then enters the conversation to discuss the prince and Mirabel's sparring, firmly stating that Mirabel possesses a God-given gift for swordsmanship. As a proud uncle, he begins babbling about how she defeated both the prince and Elliot, while Elliot supports his father and even demonstrates how effectively Mirabel defeated him. The Grand Duke laughs at how enthusiastically the father and son praise Mirabel's abilities, but he asks his oldest grandson if he is distressed that Mirabel defeated him, to which Elliot smiles and says he's overjoyed to finally have someone to spar with. Mirabel finds it very reassuring because Elliot matches what she was thinking, but she flinches when her uncle begins to say that Mirabel has amazing skill after a month of physical training and 3 days of sword guidance, and he wonders whether her father, Guile, has ever taught her before. Cornelia denies this because Guile died when Mirabel was too little to carry a sword, but she is pleased to learn that their daughter has a skill and knows Guile will be overjoyed to hear about it. Now that Mirabel's early training is out of the question, Brian thinks she's extraordinary. After all, she beat Elliot, who's also very talented. What's more, her intuitive moves, like making herself appear to trip or seizing someone's sword, aren't honed through practice. They must be innate. He then boldly asserts his belief that Mirabel would one day become a magnificent knight to him if she begins training in swordsmanship immediately, and asks Cornelia for permission to train Mirabel to become a knight. A knight suit would be so cool on her! Cornelia does not want to force Mirabel to do anything she dislikes because she understands what a torture it is to be forced to do something. So Uncle Brian asks Mirabel directly. He reassures her that even if she does not wish to receive full knight training, she can still learn swordsmanship from him. This training will undoubtedly be difficult, but she is more than willing to go through it if it means being able to kill Daniel herself. With resolve in her eyes, she cheerfully says that she wants to do it, making her uncle pleased and Mommy patting her head with joy. That evening, our girl was worn out, as who wouldn't be after a day full of activities? So she lays down on her bed to rest. Suddenly, Vivre speaks out and proposes that she use her divine powers to relieve her exhaustion, which would be very helpful. So she sits down and follows the Guardian's instructions to gather her energy. Not long after, she is able to produce a ball of divine force that begins to rain on her, instantly relaxing her and removing the fatigue from her body. Oh, how I wish I could do this as well! Mirabelle wonders if she can cure her mother on her own using her power, and she is surprised when Vivre confirms this. But because healing wounds differs from healing illnesses, Mirabelle should first practice her skills. So, for the time being, our girl has no choice but to put her trust in Father Lionel's healing abilities. So she goes to bed and calls it a day. Mirabelle wakes up early the next morning before the sun rises, thanks to the heavenly power that has rejuvenated her body, so she chooses to go for an early training. However, when she arrives at the training area, Elliot is already practicing. She instantly approaches him to ask why he is so early and begins to feel guilty, fearing it is related to their fight yesterday. Elliot confesses with an uneasy smile that he had trouble sleeping after their match. He clarifies that this isn't due to any bitterness or jealousy on his part. Rather, he simply wants to be a strong big brother who can protect her. Mirabelle is taken aback by Elliot's genuine care for her. She was expecting his frustration, but instead he treats her like a real sister. The whole family adores her. Except for Daniel, of course. Elliot's lips tremble and his cheeks flush, but he musters the confidence to ask Mirabelle if she considers him her older brother, and if so, if she can begin calling him Big Brother. Aw, he really wants a baby sister. This boy is so precious. Elliot quickly assures her that it is totally her choice, which Mirabelle finds adorable and is unable to resist. She agrees to call him Big Brother if he also starts calling her Belle, which causes the lovely child to grin sweetly. She then decides to use her divine talents on Elliot's fatigued shoulder, which amazes him. So she reveals that she has been gifted with divine abilities by the goddess Duana herself. His arms feel lighter than before, so that makes sense. But Mirabelle swiftly requests that he not tell anybody, not even his uncle or their grandfather, and he swears to do so. Not long after, Uncle Brian arrives in the training area, and they begin physical and sword training. However, the poor uncle is taken aback and definitely feels left out when he notices that the two kids are now calling each other Big Bro and Belle. Our girl notices that her uncle seems to be jelly about it, so she tells him he can now call her Belle as well, much to the delight of the big guy. Such cuties. Mirabelle is now in her room, holding the documents that Elliot has compiled with information about the workers. However, none of the servants are in charge of receiving and delivering letters, so she decides to keep the files for the time being. Upon exiting her room, she fails to notice Daniel's presence, prompting him to lecture her for forgetting to greet him. How about you greet her since you were the one who noticed her first? She greets him, but her uncle begins to comment loudly that she will undoubtedly grow up arrogant, even saying that he will ask the Grand Duke to teach her proper manners. Daniel is getting on her nerves, so she decides to fight back by innocently asking if he lives in the Cretan mansion because he doesn't have a house. She goes on to mention that she feels bad for him because even she and her mother have a house before going to the mansion. She has a point. Is he homeless or something? Daniel gets frustrated and starts cursing at her. Then Grandpa shows up to calm him, telling him not to be so upset about a child's harmless question before beaming brightly at Mirabelle. Afterwards, she visits the garden and rushes to her mom for an embrace. It is at that moment that she suddenly realizes that the maid wears the identical brooch that she had seen Daniel wearing. Yup. You can bet Mirabelle is thinking the same thing we are, and she suspects this maid works for Daniel. If the brooch is what Daniel's people wear, it'll be easier to find out who took her mother's letter. Mirabelle wonders whether her mother is ever curious about what happened to her letters. Although Cornelia is curious, she is reluctant to look into it further, content with the fact that she's now back with her father. Mirabelle understands her mother's fear since she knows everyone in the estate, and if the culprit is someone she knows, she'll be devastated. I disagree with her mother. They should have investigated this immediately, at least for her daughter's safety. Mirabelle has no choice but to find the culprit on her own, and now she learns that the maid's name is Helen Roosevelt. So when she goes to her room, she swiftly checks the file, but the maid's name is not in it. She also learns from Kalina that the brooch is a popular item that can help the owner's health. Therefore, she is back at square one. Vivre is intrigued about this item, so Mirabel draws it. And it does look familiar to the Guardian, but she believes it has nothing to do with Calypso because normal people wore it back then as well. Suddenly, Vivre senses Calypso's energy and begins instructing Mirabel on where she can feel the black energy. And as they come closer, Mirabel is having difficulty breathing. Vivre reveals that it's because she's a saintess. The black energy hurts her harder. The door where the black energy concentrates opens, and as expected, it is her homeless great uncle who now questions what she's doing in the corridor. Mirabel quickly acts innocent and claims she has come to apologize for her earlier behavior. But this madman merely turns around and slams his door. Mirabel is now safe, but Vivre warns her to be cautious the next time since, while Daniel has not yet awakened the Black Dragon's power, he can still use a fraction of it. As they walk back to her room, Mirabel discovers that when Daniel uses Calypso's power, he'll be able to feel when she uses divine powers as well. So Vivre proposes that she refrain from using it within the mansion until she can better control it, which motivates her to continue training. The following day, Mirabel spots Barden, Daniel's butler, and approaches him to ask if they may have a little chat, causing him to flinch slightly. See that? They are practically surrounded by suspicious people! Barden is on Elliot's list, and he has been working for the Cretans for quite some time, making him a perfect puppet for Daniel. Mirabel begins to question what he does when her great-uncle is not present, and when he responds that he supervises the other butlers, our girl takes advantage of the chance to nab him, claiming that he must know who handles letters in the mansion. Barden admits that the people in charge of the letters report to him, causing Mirabel to question why. The butler freezes and does not respond, leading our girl to feel that he is hiding something. So she smiles and explains that she's only asking because she wants to send a letter to a friend. This causes Barden to sigh with relief and asks Mirabel if she knows her friend's address. When she replies she doesn't, he offers her the alternative option of leaving the letter with the Capitol Guards for an extra cost, but this does not guarantee that it will be delivered. Gotcha! She's cornered him, so she pretends to be naive again, this time saying that she thinks it's weird that her mother's letters, which included an address, had never arrived at the mansion. Barden is taken aback before smiling uncomfortably to say that he is unsure as well. However, the conversation is cut short when Kalina shows up to remind her that it is soon time for her lesson, prompting her to bid farewell to the butler. Mirabel is certain Barden is lying as they walk since she noticed him quivering when she mentioned the letter. In the middle of her thoughts, Kalina decides to reassure her that she can always ask either her or Anita any questions. This prompts her to reveal her mom's letter, but when the two maids react with gloom and say they never knew anything like this happened, Mirabel realizes that the maids have no idea about the accident. Further proof that Barden is really suspicious. Then Mirabel asks Kalina to accompany her to the mailroom, and when they get there, Mirabel dashes to the door and begins to listen in on the servants' conversations inside. They overheard her discussing the letters with Barden, and now they're all worried the truth may slip out. Mirabel hears them calling each other's names and is positive that Cedric and Wilter are on Elliot's list. Our girl loses it when they bring up the fact that they stole Cornelia's letter, so she storms into the room and demands that they repeat what they just said. It seems like this is far too simple. I don't know. Was this Barden's plan? Mirabel is so outraged that she wants to know if they stole her mother's letters. But when both men quickly kneel in front of her, she knows something is amiss. As a result, she asks Kalina to bring her grandfather or uncle. Despite their confessions, she observes that both men appear weird as if they're still hiding something. Really fishy. Soon after, her grandfather rushes to her, leading her to hurriedly explain what she overheard, which enrages Grandpa, prompting him to yell out the names of the two men, who instantly seek his forgiveness. Wilter trembles as he admits to stealing all of Lady Cornelia's letters and throwing them away. Before Grandpa reacts, he expresses concern for Mirabel and encourages her to go outside, while promising her that he will provide details later, leaving her with no other option. Outside the room, Uncle Brian and Elliot are waiting, so she quickly lets them know that Grandpa is inside and suggests he head in, leaving Elliot a bit puzzled. As Elliot and Mirabel walk towards the garden, Elliot hurriedly asks her if the uproar is related to the letters. He's curious to know whether she has any evidence that their great-uncle is behind everything. She believes, however, that Daniel initiated the activity, and she's foolish enough to fall for his trap. Yup, she became overly emotional and didn't really think things through. She goes on to say that Grandpa is still conducting the interrogation, but she doubts they will reveal Daniel's name since she suspects Wilter will accept the blame and the case will be closed. This leads Elliot to feel anxious since there's no proof against their uncle, and they apprehended the culprit, which contradicts their theory. Watching his reactions bring her down, but she brushes it off, convincing herself that Elliot knows nothing and his perspective is valid. Wilter and Cedric accept full responsibility for the letter incident, and her grandfather and mother decide to terminate them. Well, the Cretans are really kind people, so it is what it is. Mirabelle then believes that stopping Daniel is the best way to resolve the situation, but Vivre reminds her to be gentle with herself, as they will have another opportunity to prepare for. At the very least, this alerts her that Daniel is truly cunning. Instead of dwelling on her past actions, Mirabelle decides to lift her mom's spirits with a warm hug. Even though her mom keeps saying she's okay, Mirabelle can tell that her mom is really shaken up after finding out that one of their workers messed up her letters. She encourages her mother to take a seat, believing that the most she can do at the time is to utilize her heavenly power to relieve her mother's exhaustion, which surprises her mother as she feels the effects of her magical ability. However, Mirabelle begs her to keep it a secret because she's currently honing her skills and intends to share the news herself once she's more confident. Her mother agrees, wrapping her in a tight hug, but a knock on the door interrupts the moment, announcing the arrival of the Empress and Prince. Are we about to dive into the sequel of Cretan and Castro's romantic stories? The little prince's eyes sparkle as he asks Mirabelle to spar, but she turns it down immediately because every time this kiddo visits, he sees her as a sparring machine and will not stop until he wins. Adrian feels so down right now, and our girl can't say no to that face, so she agrees to play, but only on the condition that they play for 5 rounds. Even though Adrian can be demanding at times, she finds safety in the presence of the prince, who gives her the assurance that neither Daniel nor any of his men will harm her. They then get a knock from Rupel, the Cretan's front guard, who informs Mirabelle that she has a visitor outside wearing shabby clothes named Jeffrey. The prince wonders who this Jeffrey is, prompting Mirabelle to explain that he is her friend, and she requests the prince's permission to have Jeffrey join them. This is no problem for our not-so-spoiled prince, but he uses the chance to ask that in exchange they spar 10 times, to which our girl is forced to comply. Upon reaching the front gate, Mirabelle quickly approaches Jeffrey and requests that the guard provide him access whenever he pays a visit. After that, the two kids innocently hold hands, which makes the prince a little bit jealous, so he demands that Mirabelle do the same with him, and the 3 of them walk inside the mansion hand in hand. When they arrive in Mirabelle's room, she motions for Jeffrey to properly present himself to the prince, which he does, prompting Adrian to do the same. Mirabelle then observes Jeffrey's hair is a little longer than the last time they met, and comments on how well it suits him, causing him to flush and consider growing it out a little more. The mood between them is warming up. But don't forget the prince is around, who basically asks what their relationship is because if this is how friends treat one another, he wonders why Mirabelle treats him differently. Well, he is the prince, and she cannot treat him without respect, which makes Adrian upset because he expects her to speak casually to him as well. This is still a no-no for Mirabelle, since it may generate misunderstandings among those around them, and she does not want to bring shame upon her family, prompting Adrian to cry because he truly wants her to be his actual friend. Jeffrey decides to provide a hand to the prince and proposes that, when they're alone, Mirabelle should act casually toward him. This gets the prince grinning, so she has no choice but to accept. After that, Adrian wants to be friends with Jeffrey, so he asks him to start calling him by name. Jeffrey then finds out that they're planning to spar, so he decides to join in, and they become friends right away. Aw, the prince really wants to have friends. I'm just crossing my fingers that he doesn't end up head over heels for Mirabelle, or we might have a repeat of his dad's tragic love saga. When they arrive at the training grounds, Uncle Brian decides to watch over the prince's sparring with Jeffrey because he is very intrigued about our silver-haired boy's ability. Mirabelle observes that Jeffrey has no proper stance, as opposed to the prince, who's received solid training, and that he appears disturbed when carrying a sword. When the fight begins and the prince notices Jeffrey is looking away, he uses the chance to sprint forward and attack, while Jeffrey simply uses his palm to grab Adrian's shirt and knock him down to the ground. Jeffrey quickly requests assistance in injuring the prince, prompting Brian and Mirabelle to rush towards them. Because Mirabelle is unable to use her divine powers, she has been carrying medication from the temple, which she administers to Adrian, and his body immediately stops aching. Jeffrey approaches the prince timidly, but this prince demonstrates true sportsmanship by smilingly assuring him that he's okay and impressed at his strength. Adrian really radiates the charm of a little brother. Jeffrey then reveals that he has seen mercenaries fight and has picked up certain moves, which makes Uncle Brian to twinkle twinkle because he has come across another talented child. He extends his hand and asks the kid if he wants to learn swordsmanship. But even though Jeffrey respects the gesture and understands the Iron Duke can strengthen him, he declines, explaining that he must pursue his goal. Brian is dismayed, yet he decides not to push Jeffrey. But he does offer him advice because he appears hesitant to use a sword. He explains that a sword can kill, but it can also protect, so he hopes Jeffrey will not be scared to use it. As they listen to the knights mumbling about how outstanding Jeffrey is, just like their young master Elliot, Mirabelle glances over at the crowd and realizes that her big brother has been observing them the whole time. Elliot approaches them, prompting Mirabelle to introduce Jeffrey to him, but it appears Elliot is now in protective brother mode. So when he discovers that Jeffrey is just 11 years old, making him younger than Big Bro, he aims to frighten him by holding Jeffrey's hand and stressing that he stays as Belle's friend. As the sun sets, the little prince must return home, and Jeffrey must also leave. However, she insists that Jeffrey stay for dinner, and even big brother Elliot agrees, so she starts clinging to him, making him unable to say no. Time to meet the family! It's time for dinner, and Mirabelle is waiting outside the dining area for Jeffrey, who must still be showering. After some time, Jeffrey appears, and he looks like a little prince in that lovely tailored outfit. He becomes quite shy when she compliments him, and as they sit at the dining table, she introduces him to everyone. Grandpa realizes that he is Mirabelle's friend, whom he managed to remove from the wanted list and has offered to remain in their mansion. Jeffrey still refuses the offer, stating boldly that he intends to form his own mercenary group without the assistance of others. The Grand Duke respects the young boy's determination, but he also emphasizes that he may always come to the Cretan for support, and to demonstrate this, he offers him something. The insignia serves as a visual cue for the guards to assist him in times of need. As a result, he feels incredibly special and is embarrassed to thank the Grand Duke. Then they start eating, and our boy finally gets a real meal, which makes the whole table feel so homey and cozy. Cornelia reluctantly requests Jeffrey to remain in the mansion because it's becoming late. Just as he's about to say no, Mommy, being Mommy, starts lecturing him about how dangerous it is to walk outside after 8 in the evening because monsters and wild creatures could be lurking in the woods. So all he can do is thank her. Mirabelle walks him to his room, where she chooses to use her divine power to relieve his exhaustion. The two then say their goodnights, and Mirabelle exits from Jeffrey's room with the hope that she brought him a little joy today. First thing in the morning, she decides to see how Jeffrey's doing. But when she arrives, she finds the bed neatly arranged and a thank you note in terrible handwriting. Though she feels somewhat let down, she knows that Jeffrey has promised to return, so for the time being, all she can do is hope that he stays healthy and safe. He really grew up independent, huh? After a few days, she returns to the temple for divine power training, so she eagerly asks Father Lionel what they will do today. But to her surprise, Pleon responds by saying that her lesson today is materializing vivre. However, she may be unable to accomplish this on her own, so Pleon tells her that the temple's priests will help her. They enter the crystal room, and Mirabelle is astounded by the statue of goddess Duana with the guardian dragon protecting her. She can't believe she'll be able to see the actual vivre. Oh, I'd love to see vivre in dragon form. It appears that the other priests are already waiting for her, so she moves to the middle and follows their instructions to try to place her divine powers in the pendant. They then ask her to close her eyes and visualize the real version of vivre, which begins to drain her energy, yet the priests continue to tell her not to open her eyes and just concentrate. Already on the point of dying, she begins to fear that the priest is plotting her expulsion and replacing her with someone else. I'm with you, girl, because really, I don't understand this mysterious vibe. Suddenly, her divine powers return, and when she opens her eyes, a white dragon congratulates her on a job well done as he introduces himself as Vivre. For some reason, he doesn't appear mighty, but rather enchanting and beautiful. I like it. Mirabelle then asks Vivre if he would continue in his massive dragon shape, prompting the dragon guardian to change into a small, charming version. Pleon reveals that in this form, Vivre is invisible to people who lack divine powers, and even Calypso cannot sense him. Okay, that's good to know. Once Mirabelle returns home, she is summoned to her grandfather's office because she has received a letter from the Emperor himself telling her to go to the palace the next day. Her mother and Uncle Brian both wanted to accompany her on this unexpected invitation, but she insisted on going alone. She arrives at the palace the next day and graciously greets the Emperor, prompting the Emperor to approach her with those piercing red eyes. However, she gets shocked when he kneels to level with her and realizes why Adrian is interested in her since she resembles Cornelia. He must be so in love with her mom. Anyway, I'm glad he isn't evil. Then they settle down, prompting the Emperor to ask her if she may continue to be his son's friend, as he can tell his 7-year-old son struggles to get along with other noble children. It wasn't until recently that he realized he hadn't shown Adrian affection, so he aims to become a better father, which is also why he invited her to ask her for her help, causing Mirabel to smile sweetly and clarify that she is already good friends with Adrian. As they enjoy tea, the Emperor inquires whether Guile was a good father, prompting Mirabel to explain that, despite her father's busy schedule, he always made time to play with her and never failed to bring flowers to her mother. James finds this endearing since it sounds just like the Guile he knows. Before, he too believed Guile was too gentle to be a knight. When she returns home, Cornelia is nervously waiting for her. But when Mirabel grins and tells her that they chatted about how excellent a father Guile is, Mom smiles with relief. That brings closure for the ex-fiancés, but the Empress was probably the one who suffered the most from this tragic love. Suddenly, Daniel passes by, and our girl decides to have Vivre follow him and look for information. Oh, look at him sitting on Daniel's head! It's been a week since she requested Vivre to stay with Daniel, and she's starting to worry that something must have happened to him. Fortunately, as if this cute dragon had heard her, he appears in front of her, telling her that he will never be killed unless someone attacks her, which surprises Mirabel. In any case, Vivre begins presenting the information he got, stating that Daniel spent the first 4 days visiting with his friends, but on the 5th day, he went to a slum area, entered a house with a dark basement, and discovered something horrible. I know this is getting serious, but I'm distracted by how adorable this little dragon is. Vivre goes on to claim that just as she materialized him, he found Calypso also had a child that could materialize him, and the child is in Daniel's basement. Mirabel rushes to the temple the next morning and tells everyone what Vivre told her, and they are all astonished to find that Daniel has a dungeon where he keeps Wilter and Cedric, as well as the child Vivre suspects Daniel will use to break Calypso's seal. Mirabel suggests that they rescue the child, which Father Lionel agrees to because without the kid, Daniel will have a more difficult time releasing Calypso. However, they only need a few people to carry out the mission, and while Pleon finds it difficult to ask Mirabel because she's still a child, he requests that she join the trip because she's the only one who can hear Vivre's voice outside the crystal room. Our girl has no problem with it because she is used to this stealth mission business, having previously been a mercenary herself. After hours of discussion, Father Lionel and a paladin called Bertram have been selected to join the mission. The next day is the mission day, and a dashing divine knight introduces himself as Bertram, but Mirabel is concerned that his large build will attract too much attention in the slums. Worry not, girlie, for it appears that the temple has already made some plans. When they arrive in the slums, Father Lionel appears quite charming in his disguise of black ponytailed hair, while Bertram and Mirabel have gray hair, all thanks to the magical bracelet artifact that can transform someone's appearance. After Vivre starts pointing them in the right direction, they reach the house, find the hidden door to the dungeon, and find themselves in what appears to be a jail area. They start following a child's voice and soon spot Wilter, Cedric, and the boy in a cell looking dreadful. Mirabel tries to talk to the servants, but because she's undercover, they're unable to identify her, so she decides to simply unlock the prison cell. Where did she get the key, you ask? It was simply hanging beside the stairway, which made her anxious about how easy it is to break into Daniel's prison. Bertram and Lionel assist the servants while she helps the young boy, when suddenly his eyes widen and begin smirking, giving her goosebumps and screaming that they must leave quickly. However, they are too late as they are now surrounded by Daniel's people, while the small kid proudly declares that he was correct when he informs them that he had seen a flying dragon surrounding their master a few days ago. This surprises our girl, who guesses that it's because the young boy with purple eyes is Calypso's seed, which allows him to see Vivre. Pleon previously said only people with divine power can see Vivre, so perhaps he possesses divine powers? The youngster then asks that the thugs keep their promise to let him go, prompting all of them to chuckle because their master needs him, not the intruders, so he must stay. Bertram, a heavenly knight, gets impatient and does not want to continue listening to them, so he draws his sword, prompting the thugs to prepare to fight as well. The fight kicks off, and one man slips in and attempts to really kill a child, but our girl isn't your average kid, so Mirabelle uses her Lespid sword to break the man's sword and finish him off. Bertram soon finishes silencing all of the thugs, and when he asks what they plan to do with the child, the small boy panics and begs her not to kill him. Mirabelle does not trust the youngster yet, but they will not kill him considering he is their mission. When they get to a safe place, Mirabelle inquires about the child's identity and discovers that he is Derek Moore. But his gold eyes boggle her because, as she previously saw, the boy had purple eyes in the prison. However, she decides to dismiss it, believing that she must be mistaken given how dark the dungeon was. Is he a spy or what? The boy then confirms that he can indeed see Vivre, which even our cute dragon finds odd too. Anyway, she goes to heal Wilter and Cedric before demanding to know why they're in the dungeon. She then hears that when they were fired, they were apprehended, which our girl finds predictable given that Daniel will undoubtedly get rid of the rats. Still, she can't help but feel outraged because these two men sided with Daniel, and if they had revealed the truth, they would have uncovered that Daniel is the one guilty for stealing the letters. She feels zero sympathy for the two servants. After all, Daniel is the one responsible for her mom's death. After that, they take the child back to the temple, where Pleon offers to put Derek in the care of the orphanage that the temple runs, a suggestion she gladly approves. The following day, Daniel acts just like he usually does at breakfast. However, she doesn't consider this a reason to feel at ease, as Daniel will inevitably discover what transpired and will employ any method required to locate Derek. Mirabelle is determined to gather all the knowledge she can about Derek and formulate a plan to protect him before Daniel takes action. She then returns to the temple, where the Archbishop informs her that Wilter and Cedric claim that they were not the ones who stole the letters. They said that Barden offered them a hefty sum of money for taking responsibility, but on their way home they were attacked and woke up in the dungeon. She then learns that Derek is an orphan living in a slum who was similarly attacked one day and imprisoned without knowing why. The infiltrators show him a strange symbol and assault him before treating him after he falls unconscious. The Archbishop believes that the abuse is necessary to break the seal, which makes Mirabelle feel bad since Calypso will be released 14 years later, meaning that poor Derek endured for that long. Imagine being kidnapped and tortured without knowing why. Daniel, you evil monster! After that, she wants to see Derek, but just as the Archbishop is about to show her the way, a loud bang on the door stops them, and they discover that Derek disappeared. While everyone is on the lookout for him, Vivre stumbles upon a lead and quickly lets Mirabelle know that he's found a priest who's under Calypso's control. Mirabelle is nudged into action, which makes Vivre a bit anxious as she quickly walks up to the priest. After a polite greeting, she straightforwardly asks if they've been affected by Calypso's power. And a chilling atmosphere envelops them as the priest smirks, wondering how she found out. Mirabelle then swiftly uses Lespid, creating a commotion and drawing the attention of everyone around. Pleon then inquires whether the priest is under Calypso's influence, which Mirabelle confirms. However, this just encourages the priest to act out, prompting Pleon to reveal that Mirabelle is a saint and the sword she carries is Lespid. Without the goddess's will, even a saint cannot wield it. Knowing this, the priest tries to escape, surprising everyone. So Pleon quickly tells Mirabelle that the priest probably has some traces of Calypso, which looks like a flame stain, and suggests she should cut that out using Lespid. She quickly plunges and corners the priest, using her fast and precise moves to cut the flame, causing her to drop to the ground. The flame goes out in an instant, and Mirabelle quickly apologizes to the unconscious priest while she tends to his wounds. After everything is settled, Pleon suggests they should concentrate on tracking Derek. The next day, while they are out for snacks at a cafe, the Crown Prince realizes Mirabelle is deep in thought, prompting him to react. Following that, as they go down the street, they see a commotion that piques their curiosity. Mirabelle recognizes the voice as they approach and is astonished to see Jeffrey and Derek together. Mirabelle then discovers that Derek has stolen Jeffrey's pouch, but is willing to return it if Jeffrey guarantees that he will let him free, which Jeffrey readily agrees to. After returning Jeffrey's pouch, Jeffrey quickly shakes it to check Duke Creton's insignia, which surprises Mirabelle. She then tells him that if something like this happens again, he should just come to her, and she promises to ask Grandpa to get him another one. It worries her because if Derek utilizes Calypso's power on Jeffrey, he may die. Looking at Derek, she's surprised that he is staring at her as if he doesn't know her, and she recalls disguising her identity with an artifact during their first meeting. Derek is about to go, which is bad news for our girl, but his tummy sends out a huge growl, prompting Mirabel to convince him to eat and play with them for the day. Derek pauses momentarily upon hearing this, concerned about whether Mirabel's friends will agree to her. Despite everyone's positive reaction, Derek still hesitates, prompting Jeffrey to intervene and allow him to make the final decision. Derek then timidly asks everyone if he can join them, which makes them all smile and introduce themselves to him one by one. Our potential male leads in one frame! After they've all enjoyed a satisfying meal, Anita leads them to the cake shop, but along the way, Derek comes to a halt and quickly pulls on his hood to conceal his face, confusing Mirabel. When she sees a priest and knight from the temple, she understands why he's afraid, prompting her to decide that she should make them leave for the time being. So she just talks to them casually and exhales deeply as they walk away. However, as she turns to face Derek, the color of his eyes turns to gold, prompting her to wonder if this is related to Calypso. As time goes by, Mirabel contemplates her next steps. She feels the urge to keep an eye on Derek's actions, yet Daniel's presence hinders her from inviting him over. At that moment, Jeffrey inquires if Derek has somewhere to stay, but Derek stutters once more, prompting Jeffrey to conclude that he does not, so he announces his intention to let him stay with him. Derek begins to cry because he cannot figure out why Mirabel and Jeffrey are trying to help him, but Jeffrey just states that he does not have a deep reasoning, and while placing his arm over the small boy's shoulder, Jeffrey agrees and asks again if he's coming with him or not. The children are overjoyed when Derek agrees, and they accompany the two boys back to the inn as Prince Adrian and Mirabel make their way home. Vivre unexpectedly calls her while they're in the carriage to let her know that Daniel is going to the slums and to confirm her suspicions about the odd brooch. Mirabel goes to the temple to tell them that she has located Derek, and the temple is unable to track him since his eyes become gold anytime priests or knights are present. Derek doesn't trust the temple yet, so she tells them that her friend is looking after him in the meantime. However, she warns them that Daniel has already gone to the slums today, implying that he'll be checking everywhere looking for Derek, but Mirabel appears to have a plan. After that, she gets home, and Vivre tells her right away that Daniel had a somewhat regular day at the brooch factory, until he finds out that the workers there are under the influence of Calypso. Vivre also suspects that the brooch contains some kind of illusion, but he's unsure, making him feel terrible for not being more helpful. Mirabel begins patting him and assures him that he did well for his first visit and that they have pressing issues to solve, such as Daniel discovering that Derek is missing. Vivre says Daniel dispatched his men, so they have to protect the kid, prompting Mirabel to smile and announce that she's already come up with a temporary solution and needs to visit the inn where the boys are staying first thing in the morning. The following morning, Vivre keeps an eye on Daniel, who's growing increasingly irate about the fact that Derek has still not been located. I must say, I'm just loving how frustrated he looks. Meanwhile, Mirabel stops by the inn and notices that Derek seems comfortable sleeping and just woke up. She quickly informs him that men are in search of a kid around 10 years old with navy hair and either gold or purple eyes. This news swiftly brings Derek to his senses. Of course, Mirabel states she didn't say anything because she believes he's being pursued, prompting Derek to reveal that the men want to hurt him because they believe the more he suffers, the bigger the gain. They beat him so much until he blacks out, then treats his wound before beating him again. This is why he's on the run and hiding. They really tortured this poor little baby. Hearing this enrages Jeffrey, who believes he needs every available help. He additionally shares that he was previously a wanted child, but thanks to Mirabel, he's now free. This sparks Derek's interest, so Mirabel reveals that her grandfather was able to remove Jeffrey from the wanted list. With that said, she asks Derek if he too needs her help. A sign that he is starting to trust our girl, the little kid finally answers yes, just what she was hoping for. She then hands him the magical bracelet, and as soon as he wears it, his hair gets shorter and blonde. So this is Mirabel's temporary solution. After that, she tries to get an answer from him about why he ran away from the temple, which causes Derek to appear worried. He explains that when he was in the temple, he couldn't breathe properly and felt as if he didn't belong there, which is why he left. This could be because of Calypso, but Mirabel informs him that the temple is the best place for him to be protected. But if he does not want to go, he can request to be relocated somewhere else. Derek appears to be considering Mirabel's advice as he admits that he hurt someone at the temple and wishes to apologize. This causes our girl to stand up and ask if he wants to go now, but Derek appears to not be ready. So Mirabel decides not to force him and instead offers to bring someone from the temple to accompany him. Jeffrey then assures Mirabel that they're going to wait for her return, and she leaves. I have a bad feeling about this. When Mirabel arrives at the temple, she happily informs the Archbishop and Lionel that Derek wishes to return to the temple but is not yet ready, so she hopes that Father Lionel will accompany her to the inn to make Derek feel at ease. Lionel gives a lovely smile as the Archbishop advises that they bring Bertram with them. I loved Lionel's black hair, and I hope we can see more of it. However, when they arrive at the inn, the owner is already groaning with pain. Father Lionel instantly uses his healing power on him, prompting the owner to explain that men had caused a commotion and were looking for a boy. This prompts them to instantly go upstairs, but all they find is a wrecked room, footprints from the thugs, and the bracelet Mirabel gave Derek. I knew this would happen! There is no question that Daniel took him, and because he's unlikely to head to the Cretan estate, they must at once locate another site. Don't forget my boy Jeffrey, too! Where is he? They hop on horses to make their ride go more quickly, and Mirabel mentally contacts Vivre to let him know that Derek has gone missing and that she must know Daniel's whereabouts immediately. When Vivre says Daniel is at his factory southeast of the Cretan estate, they all rush there. The Guardian also provides them a landmark that says there's a large fir tree on the way, which, sure enough, they discover just in time, along with a carriage and some goons. The enemy's carriage gets quickly blocked by Bertram and Lionel, and our girl insists on seeing what was on it. One guy walks up to Bertram, locks eyes with him, and asks if they're kidding. Why does Bertram become prettier with each appearance on screen? I'm not complaining, though. Anyway, Mr. Divine Knight simply informs them that they will use force if they do not cooperate, prompting the thugs to begin attacking them. One man strikes a wooden stick at Mirabel, compelling her to summon her divine sword and split the thug's wood in half. Another man attacks her, but is instantly punched in the stomach, causing him to collapse to the ground, shivering. After taking care of the mediocre goons, they investigate the back of the carriage, open a barrel, and discover an unconscious Jeffrey inside. They inspect the others, but Derek isn't there, leading Bertram to suspect that this carriage is a decoy. Daniel outsmarted them again! Father Lionel heals Jeffrey, and Mirabel feels guilty for dragging him into all of this. When he regains consciousness, he instantly searches for Derek and is surprised when Mirabel shakes her head, stating that they too have no idea. Jeffrey describes how while they waited at the inn for her to come back, someone began pounding on the door and forced access. The men didn't recognize Derek, but that didn't stop them from attacking them. Despite his best efforts, Jeffrey was helpless and put into danger, so Derek chose to remove the bracelet. Jeffrey then claims that he cannot recall anything after that because a man hit his head and he blacked out. When they return to the temple, the Archbishop and Pleon get confused since they don't see Derek with them, but are with another kid. Mirabel says that the silver-haired is her friend Jeffrey Coleman, but she gets cut off by Pleon, who identifies him as the Mercenary King. This is becoming very confusing for Jeffrey, but it appears that the temple is willing to share the truth with him. They allow him to attend the meeting, and Pleon becomes concerned throughout the conversation when he learns that Derek is missing. Mirabel wants a search team, adding that she will notify them as soon as Vivre obtains information indicating Derek is with Daniel. One member then questions whether the child next to Mirabel is the Mercenary King, which she confirms and argues that she did not bring him to the temple for his help, but rather because she believes he deserves an explanation after being pulled into the drama. Mirabel and Jeffrey go somewhere private after the meeting, while the little boy continues to process the story about the Black Dragon. But if this is the case, he urges that they save Derek right now, to which she agrees. Mirabel is ready to tell him why the priest referred to him as the Mercenary King, but Jeffrey interrupts her, indicating that he prefers to not know. Still, now that he understands the situation, he is curious about her true identity. Will she confess to him that she regressed? And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the